All right, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into risk management. And believe me, it's way more exciting than it sounds. Imagine having this superpower, you know, like being able to see problems before they even happen,
A superpower, I like that.
and then making smarter choices and becoming like a master of uncertainty. That's basically what risk management could do for you, right?
You're right. It's not just about avoiding bad stuff. It's about getting the most out of every opportunity, even when things get a little, unpredictable.
Exactly, and that's what this deep dive is all about, giving you the tools to become a risk management pro.
Think of it like a toolkit for handling whatever challenge comes your way, and trust me, they're coming.
So before we jump into all the details, let's get on the same page. What exactly is risk management?
At its heart, it's a way to identify, assess, and deal with those uncertainties that could affect an organization's ability to reach its goals.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding disasters. It's about making smart choices in any situation where you're not totally sure what will happen.
Right, whether you're launching a new product or even just deciding where to invest your money, risk management can help you navigate those unknowns.
So there's like a framework for this, right? Some kind of internationally recognized guidebook.
Exactly. It's called ISO 31000.2018. It gives organizations of all kinds a set of guidelines for implementing effective risk management.
ISO 31000.2018, huh?
Yeah, but don't let that intimidate you. It's about building a culture of being aware of risks and making risk management a part of how you do business every day.
So it's not a one-time thing.
No, it's something you weave into the very fabric of your organization.
Gotcha. So it starts with leadership commitment, right? And then moves to setting policies, defining roles and responsibilities, having clear goals, and creating a process for identifying, analyzing, and dealing with risks.
And of course, you need to constantly monitor and review to make sure you're on track. But hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into all that, let's define some basic terms.
Okay, definitions are key to any good deep dive. So let's start with the most basic term, risk. What does that even mean in this context?
It's basically the effect of uncertainty on objectives. It's the chance that something might happen or not happen that could affect reaching your goals.
Okay, but there are all these other terms I keep hearing. Hazard, threat, event. Are those just different types of risks?
Not exactly. Think of it this way. A hazard is a source of potential harm, like, say, a slippery floor.
Yeah.
A threat is something that could exploit a weakness and cause harm, like a hacker trying to break into your system.
So the hacker is the threat, not the weak spot in the system.
Right. Then an event is something that happens, like a natural disaster or a sudden change in the market.
And what about risk treatment?
Ah, that's the process of modifying a risk, taking steps to either reduce it, transfer it, avoid it completely, or just accept it.
So if we were launching a new product, like we talked about before, a hazard might be a delay in manufacturing. A threat could be a competitor launching a similar product first. The event is the actual launch date. And risk treatment could involve having a backup supplier or changing our marketing plan, right?
You got it. Perfect example of how those terms work in a real situation.
Makes sense. It's like we're building this framework for understanding and managing all the uncertainties that just come with doing anything. But I bet it gets even more interesting when we start looking at the specific ways to identify and assess those risks. So where do we even start figuring out what risks we need to manage?
Well, there are a bunch of techniques depending on what you're doing and what you're aiming for. Brainstorming, for instance, is a great way to tap into everyone's knowledge and experience as a team. Just get everyone together and throw out ideas.
So just get everyone in a room or a video call and start tossing out ideas.
Yeah, encourage everyone to share their perspectives. It's about sparking creativity.
Okay, but that's just one tool, right?
Yeah.
What else is in the risk manager's arsenal?
We also have checklists, classifications, and taxonomies. These are basically predefined lists or categories of risks that you can use to make sure you've considered all the usual suspects and haven't missed anything important.
So like a pilot's pre-flight checklist, making sure you've covered everything before takeoff.
Exactly. They're especially helpful when you're short on time or need a consistent approach across different projects or teams. Now, if checklists are like a broad sweep for common issues, imagine a tool that helps you dissect a specific risk, like a surgeon. That's where Ishikawa analysis or the fishbone diagram comes in.
Ah, yes, the fishbone diagram. I've seen those before, but how does it work exactly?
It's a visual way to map out all the possible causes and factors that contribute to a specific risk.
Okay.
You start with the risk you're worried about at the head of the fish, and then branch out to identify all the things that could contribute to it, like the bones.
So you might have categories like people, processes, technology, environment, and then break each of those down further.
Exactly. It helps you understand the complex interplay of factors that can lead to a risk and to pinpoint potential areas to intervene.
I'm starting to see how this arsenal is coming together. We've got brainstorming for the big picture, checklists for the essentials, and fishbone diagrams for those deeper dives into specific risks. What else do we have?
Well, in industries where safety is super important, like chemical processing or aviation, they use highly structured approaches like ASUP and SWIFT.
Hage it up and Swift. Those sound familiar. Didn't we talk about those earlier?
We did, and you're right, they're pretty similar in their approach. Both involve systematically examining a system or process to identify potential hazards and operational deviations that could lead to bad outcomes.
Gotcha.
They're especially useful when dealing with complex systems where failure could be catastrophic.
Okay, so those are our heavy-duty tools for when the stakes are really high. I feel pretty well equipped on the identification front now. But once we've identified all these potential risks, how do we decide which ones to focus on? They can't all be equally important, right?
Absolutely not. That's where risk assessment and analysis come in. It's not enough to just know what could go wrong. You need to figure out how likely it is to go wrong and how bad the impact would be if it did.
So we need to, like, size them up, prioritize them,
Well,
almost like triage in an emergency room. But how do we actually do that?
there are two main ways to approach risk assessment: qualitative and quantitative.
Go.
Qualitative assessments rely on expert judgment, experience, and descriptive scales to evaluate the likelihood and impact of a risk.
So it's a bit more subjective
Yeah,
based on the expertise and gut feelings of the people involved.
exactly. It's a good starting point when you don't have a lot of hard data or when you need a quick and flexible approach.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about situations where we do have data? Can we get more precise with our assessments?
Absolutely. That's where quantitative risk assessment comes in. It uses data, statistical models, and probabilistic analysis to give you a more objective and precise measurement of risk.
I love when we can bring data into the mix. It takes out some of the guesswork. But I'm guessing the type of assessment you use, qualitative, quantitative, or a mix of both, depends on the situation and how much precision you need.
You got it. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job. And speaking of tools, there are some really cool ones we can use to analyze and visualize risks.
Ooh, more tools. Tell me more.
One of the most common and easy to understand tools is the risk matrix. It's basically a grid that maps the likelihood of a risk happening against its potential impact.
Okay.
So on one axis, you have the likelihood from very unlikely to almost certain. And on the other axis, you have the impact from negligible to catastrophic.
So each risk we identify gets plotted on this grid based on how likely it is to happen and what the impact would be.
Exactly. And that gives you a clear visual representation of which risks are the most important to address.
I can see how that would be helpful for prioritizing resources and focusing attention where it's needed most. But what about those situations where the decisions are more complex with multiple factors to consider? Are there tools to help us navigate those tricky decision paths?
For sure. Decision tree analysis is a great tool for that. It's like a branching diagram that maps out all the possible decision paths and their potential outcomes, considering all the uncertainties and variables involved.
So it's like a choose-your-own-adventure for risk management.
Huh. Kind of. You start with a decision point and then branch out to all the possible consequences and then branch out again and again, exploring all the potential scenarios.
It sounds complex.
It can get pretty complex, but it's a powerful way to visualize the ripple effects of your decisions and make more informed choices in uncertain situations.
This is making my brain work, but in a good way. I'm starting to see how these tools can help us move from feeling overwhelmed by risk to actually understanding it and making strategic decisions.
Okay.
But I have to admit, I'm a bit of a data geek, so I'm always looking for more precision. Are there any tools that let us get really quantitative with our risk analysis?
Well, if you want to bring out the big guns, there's Monte Carlo simulation. It's a statistical technique that uses computer models to simulate a whole bunch of potential outcomes based on probabilistic data and assumptions.
So it's like running thousands of what-if scenarios through a computer to see what's most likely to happen and how those outcomes might vary.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to deal with complex systems with lots of variables and uncertainties, giving you a much richer understanding of the risks and opportunities you're facing.
Wow, that sounds incredibly powerful. I feel like we've got a whole arsenal of tools at our disposal now, from those quick qualitative assessments to those data-driven quantitative models. But now that we've identified and assessed these risks, what do we actually do about them? That's where risk mitigation comes in, right?
Absolutely. Risk mitigation is all about taking action to manage those risks we've identified and assessed. But before we dive into specific strategies, it's important to remember that the goal of risk mitigation isn't always to eliminate risk completely.
Hold on. Did I hear that right? We're not always trying to eliminate risk. That seems counterintuitive.
I know, right? But hear me out. Sometimes eliminating a risk entirely just isn't possible, or it would cost way too much compared to the potential benefits. Instead, risk mitigation is often about reducing the likelihood or impact of a risk to an acceptable level. You have to consider the organization's overall risk appetite and tolerance.
Okay, so it's about finding that sweet spot between being overly cautious and taking unnecessary risks.
Exactly. It's about making strategic decisions based on a careful analysis of the risks and rewards involved. And there are four main risk treatment options we can consider: avoidance, reduction, transfer, and acceptance.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with risk avoidance. What does that look like in practice?
Exactly. So we've talked about avoiding risks, right? Now, what about risk reduction? Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Let's imagine a company that makes, I don't know, widgets, and they're worried about accidents happening at their factory.
Okay, widgets, good example.
To reduce that risk, they could put in place stricter safety rules,
Right.
and maybe invest in newer equipment with more safety features built in.
Exactly.
And of course, provide really good training for all their employees.
So everyone knows how to work safely.
So they're not stopping making widgets, but they're taking steps to make it as safe as possible.
That's a perfect example of risk reduction. Now, how about risk transfer? How does that work in the real world?
Well, insurance is a classic example.
Right, good one.
Companies buy insurance to protect themselves from financial losses due to things like, fires, natural disasters, lawsuits, things like that.
Exactly. They're basically paying someone else to take on that risk.
Like outsourcing the management of that specific risk to a company that specializes in it.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be a really effective way to manage those risks that are either too hard or too expensive to control yourself.
Makes sense. And finally, there's risk acceptance, right? When a company decides to just live with a certain level of risk.
Right. This usually happens when trying to reduce the risk would cost more than the potential benefit, or if the risk itself is so small that it's not worth the hassle.
So it's a calculated decision to accept some level of risk, knowing that the potential downsides are manageable.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand your organization's risk appetite and tolerance, like we were discussing earlier. It helps you make those decisions strategically, not just randomly.
This is all making so much sense now. It's like we've built this framework for understanding and managing risk, starting with the big picture and then narrowing down to each specific situation.
Exactly. And remember, it's not a one-and-done thing. The world changes, new risks pop up. So you always got to be monitoring and reviewing your approach to risk management and adapting it as needed.
So risk management is an ongoing process, something that should be woven into every part of how an organization works.
Absolutely. You need a strong risk management culture where everyone, from the top down, understands the importance of identifying, assessing, and managing risks. It's not just the risk management team's job, it's everyone's responsibility.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've gone from risk newbies to feeling confident and understanding the basics.
You've picked it up quickly. It's been great discussing all this with you.
But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the big picture. We've talked a lot about the tools and techniques, but why is risk management so important in today's world? Things are changing so quickly, and it feels like there's more uncertainty than ever before.
You're right. The world is changing at an incredible pace. Disruption is everywhere. Technology is advancing faster than ever. Think about AI, the sheer amount of data out there, the political shifts happening globally. All these things create new risks for everyone, whether you're a business, a government, or just an individual.
I can see how in this environment, organizations that can manage risk effectively have a real advantage.
Yeah, it's not just about avoiding disasters anymore. It's about being able to adapt and even thrive in the face of all this uncertainty. And that's exactly what risk management helps you do.
So instead of just reacting to problems, you're anticipating them.
Exactly. You're thinking ahead, seeing those potential threats and opportunities, and being flexible enough to change course as needed.
So risk management is becoming more and more crucial for success in any field.
Absolutely. The organizations that make risk management a core part of their culture are the ones that are going to survive and thrive in the long run. They'll be able to seize those opportunities and weather whatever storms come their way.
And these principles apply to more than just businesses, right? Governments, nonprofits, communities, even individuals can benefit from understanding risk.
You got it. It's all about making smart choices, weighing the potential consequences, and taking steps to minimize the downsides while maximizing the potential for positive outcomes. Whether you're running a giant company or just trying to make the best choices for your family, risk management can help you navigate the uncertainties we all face.
It sounds like risk management isn't just a skill, it's a whole mindset, a way of looking at the world.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that risk is just part of life. We don't need to fear it. We can learn to understand it, manage it, even use it to our advantage.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel so much better prepared to deal with the risks and uncertainties in both my work and personal life.
Glad to hear it. It's been my pleasure sharing these insights with you.
But before we go, any thoughts on what's next for risk management? What does the future hold for this field?
Well, risk management is constantly evolving. New risks are always emerging, and the techniques we use are becoming more and more advanced.
So it's not a static field, it's constantly changing.
Exactly. Risk management professionals need to stay up to date and adapt their approach as the landscape changes. Just look at artificial intelligence, for example. It presents huge opportunities, but also new and unknown risks.
I see what you mean. AI could totally revolutionize risk management by analyzing massive amounts of data, spotting patterns, and even predicting future risks.
Right, but it also brings up ethical and societal questions that we need to carefully consider.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like the future of risk management is all about staying ahead of the curve, anticipating change, and being flexible enough to adapt.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive, innovative, and always open to learning and evolving. And it's about combining the power of technology with good old-fashioned human judgment and experience.
This has been a fantastic journey. We've unpacked the basics of risk management, explored all kinds of tools and techniques, and even taken a peek into the future of this field.
It really has been a great exploration. We've barely scratched the surface. But with the right mindset and the right tools, anyone can navigate the world of risk management with confidence.
To all our listeners out there, a huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of risk management.
We hope you found it helpful.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even feel a little more confident in your own ability to make smart decisions in the face of uncertainty.
Remember, a little bit of risk can be a good thing.
It's what drives innovation and helps us achieve extraordinary things.
So go out there, embrace the unknown, and make the most of every opportunity.
Until next time, happy risk managing.
Until next time.